Imagine this. An enigmatic quarry in China is where ancient builders carved the biggest blocks of stone in history for a massive undertaking, only to abandon them before their mission was completed. A whole metropolis buried under the ground. Tens of thousands might be housed in its chambers and tunnels. Additionally, we discovered a stockpile of massive bronze masks that are so intricate and unearthly in their design that they appear to be from a whole different society than anything else we have ever discovered. Archaeological finds that are not just remarkable can be found all over the world. They're confused. Some appear to challenge the capabilities of the civilizations we believe produced them because they are so large, so intricately constructed, or so uniquely designed. They are real, though. They are quantifiable, tangible locations and things that you can see, feel, and investigate rather than stories or rumors passed down through the ages. Even after decades of expert mapping, photography, and study, the explanations are frequently insufficient. We're delving into 8 of these riddles in this video. From ancient stone constructions to extraterrestrial-shaped sculptures, from stone circles that are only visible from above, to whole ancient cemeteries that are currently submerged in water. We'll examine what has been discovered, the background of each finding, the scope and difficulty of the effort, and the reasons why so many issues still need to be answered, in spite of decades of research and contemporary technology. You might ask how some of these sites were constructed at all. Others may evoke images of the lives of those who created them using equipment and skills that on paper shouldn't have been sufficient to produce what we see today. Prepare yourself, whether you're come for the engineering wonders, the history, or the unsolved riddles. We're going to examine some of the most astounding archaeological finds that defy explanation. The Yangzan Quarry is located in Jiangsu Province, China, on the outskirts of Nanjing, a location where stone has been extracted for generations. Although the quarry's history predates the Ming Dynasty, it was at that time that it served as the backdrop for one of the most ambitious building projects in imperial China. The quarry was chosen to provide stone for the Yongle Emperor's opulent mausoleum, which was a component of the complex Ming Xiaoling complex. During the beginning of the 15th century, workers began creating stone blocks on a scale that exceeded anything previously employed in Chinese construction. By carving straight into the hillside, not only was the project big, it was also unheard of. To commemorate the emperor, it was intended to create colossal parts that would construct a towering stele of perpetual splendor. However, what is left today is completely different. A huge quarry was frozen in the middle of the project, and the enormous blocks were still secured. The site is dominated by 3 enormous blocks of stone, each partially carved and left in place as though the craftsmen had dropped their tools one day and never came back. With an estimated weight of 16,000 tons, the largest of these, which is still affixed to the bedrock, is the heaviest stone block ever attempted in human history. For comparison, it weighs more than some contemporary naval destroyers. 2 other massive blocks, each weighing several thousand tons, are nearby and are in varying states of cutting. There is little question that this was designed to be a construction of astounding dimensions given their size and intended use. These blocks, according to historical accounts, were meant to be the enormous base for the Yongle Emperor's mausoleum, an erect monument that would have loomed over the surrounding area and forever declared the emperor's might and legacy. They stay buried in the quarry floor instead. Their jagged edges and rugged chiseled faces serve as a quiet reminder of the scope of the project and its sudden termination. An almost bizarre contrast between nature and human engineering can be seen at the site today, which consists of a mixture of finely carved surfaces and raw natural rock. You must take into account the engineering difficulties of the Yongshan project in order to understand its ambition. Even the most sophisticated cranes of today cannot safely lift the largest block, which weighs about 16,000 tons. It is difficult to imagine moving such a block across rough ground without the use of contemporary equipment. Picture a group of Ming-era laborers working in the sweltering sun with chisels, hammers, and wedges. Echoes bounce from the walls of the quarry with every stroke. It would have taken a long time and been exhausting. Each stone inch was taken out by hand. The blocks would have to be transported many kilometers to the mausoleum location after being detached from the bedrock. It would have taken a tremendous amount of coordination just to do that. As the blocks crept forward, thousands of workers, elaborate sledging systems, reinforced roads, or trains of wooden beams were continually swapped out. Debate concerning ancient transportation methods was sparked by even smaller monoliths, such as those at Baalbek in Lebanon. Those accomplishments seem insignificant in comparison to the Yongshan blocks. Even with unlimited staff, the logistics of moving, lifting, and precisely positioning such blocks would have been enormous. The choice to begin carving them in the first place is all the more intriguing because it is still unclear whether the concept was ever really possible. What prevented these megaliths from ever being finished? The dominant theory is simply this. It turns out that the blocks are too heavy. Calculations, or the equivalent at the time, may have been made after labor had started, exposing the nearly insurmountable task that lay ahead. It would have been extremely difficult to hoist the blocks into place, even if they could have been moved in some way. A shift in political agendas is another possibility. Resources might have been redirected elsewhere during the Ming era, which saw massive construction projects ranging from the Forbidden City to portions of the Great Wall. Although the Yongle Emperor's reign was characterized by bold endeavors, it was also constrained logistically. According to some historians, the emperor or his engineers understood the project was not only unrealistic, but also ran the risk of ruining the entire mausoleum concept if it didn't work out. For whatever reason, the project came to a sudden halt, leaving behind one of the most dramatic moments in architectural history that could have been. The Yongshan quarry still poses more queries than it resolves. Our perception of what was deemed feasible during the Ming dynasty is called into question by the enormous size of the blocks.
Transporting them undamaged would be an enormously difficult undertaking, even with today's advanced technology. Did ambition simply outstrip reality in this project? Or did the builders use a particular, now extinct technique to move such large stones? If so, why hasn't it been documented? It's natural to be awed when standing at the foot of these incomplete giants. They serve as tangible evidence of an endeavor that aimed to push the boundaries of human potential, but fell short. The blocks are still there, as though they are waiting for someone to figure out how to complete the task that was initiated more than 600 years ago. And perhaps the most interesting question is that one. Is it possible to complete it today? We now proceed to a completely different type of monumental structure from the enormous immovable rocks that were left behind in a Chinese quarry, one that does not loom over the countryside. Actually, unless you know where to look, you won't notice it at all, because this next marvel was constructed backwards. Its builders dig down into the ground rather than aim for the sky, forming a whole city that is concealed underneath. When a man in Cappadocia, Turkey, burst through a wall while remodeling his basement in 1963, he discovered something surprising: a passageway that leads to a room that is dug directly out of rock. More chambers emerged as he looked around, joined by slender hallways. This was no little cavern or storeroom. It served as the entryway to a massive underground metropolis. Currently referred to as Derinkuyu, the city is among the largest and most profound subterranean communities ever discovered. It spans several levels and descends roughly 60 meters or 200 feet below the surface. Steep staircases and winding tunnels connect these levels. Some are wide enough to accommodate crowds, while others are so small that you would have to move in single file. Cappadocia's rock is volcanically robust, sturdy when strengthened, but soft enough to carve. For thousands of years, people in this area have been excavating houses and storage spaces into the rock. But Derinkuyu is a whole other level. It is much more than just a typical shelter because of its size and complexity. Archaeologists discovered that Derinkuyu was constructed to support a community for extended periods of time. Centuries of cooking fires have left the ceilings of kitchens charred. The hallways were lined with grain, oil, and wine storage facilities. Large public halls, smaller family-sized rooms, and even areas that appeared to be meeting rooms or classrooms were present. One of the most striking aspects of the city is its ventilation system. The lower rooms remained breathable thanks to more than 50 shafts that transported fresh air through the various levels. Additionally, some shafts served as wells, allowing locals to obtain water without having to walk to the surface. Here, animals also had a space. On higher altitudes, stables were chiseled into the rock to facilitate the easy movement of livestock. To keep residents safe from invaders, parts could be sealed off by enormous circular stone doors that were up to a meter wide. The design included areas for religious purposes as well. Chapels and prayer chambers have been discovered, showing that underground life involved more than just survival. It also had a spiritual and social component. The city required careful design for food storage, waste management, and general order because it had adequate space for up to 20,000 people and their animals. It wasn't a makeshift hiding place. It was intended to function similarly to a real metropolis, albeit one that was concealed from the public eye. Numerous civilizations, including the Hittites, Phrygians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, Seljuks, and Ottomans have called Cappadocia home over the course of thousands of years. It was vulnerable to attack because of its location along vital trade routes, which also brought wealth and cross-cultural interaction. It's still unknown where Derinkuyu originated. Some scholars believe the Phrygians may have carved the first levels around the 8th or 7th century BC.
Others speculate that it might have started over 1,000 years ago with the Hittites. Later cultures developed and enhanced it over time. There is no doubt that Derinkuyu was in use by the Byzantine era. According to historical narratives and archaeological findings, it served as a haven for early Christians escaping persecution and, subsequently, for populations evading Arab attacks. The most popular answer is defense, although there are other options as well. It was perfect for year-round food and wine storage because of the steady temperature below Earth. It might have served as a safe haven for traders transporting goods along the Silk Road, or as a seasonal stop. According to some archaeologists, Derinkuyu may have had tunnels connecting it to other underground communities, forming a network for communication, trade, and safe passage. Derinkuyu's underground metropolis would have been extremely difficult to build. The sheer amount of stone that needed to be removed is astounding, even with the relatively soft volcanic rock. Without modern machinery, everything that was scooped out had to be pulled to the surface. Another problem was the lighting. Employees used oil lamps, and controlling smoke in a confined area necessitated an elaborate ventilation system from the beginning. To ensure that air flowed through each level, the builders needed to know how to put shafts. Additionally, the design had to avoid collapsing. Load-bearing pillars were positioned in strategic locations, while walls and ceilings were designed to distribute weight uniformly. While some areas of the city are smoother and more roomy, indicating advancements over generations, other areas are notably narrower and rougher, perhaps the oldest. These specifics implied that the city wasn't constructed completely at once. As every new tribe modified it to suit their needs, it expanded over generations. The majority of specialists concur that Derinkuyu's primary responsibility was to keep people safe in perilous situations. Its self-sufficiency, protective stone doors, and concealed entrances suggest a design aimed at surviving sieges or raids. However, the scale poses more significant queries. For what reason was it constructed to accommodate tens of thousands of people? Did entire communities have to spend months below because surface life was so dangerous? Or did it have several functions, including trade, storage, seasonal living, and defense? There is no doubt that Derinkuyu was not an exception. In Cappadocia, more than 200 underground cities have been discovered, some of which exhibit indications that they may be connected by extensive tunnels. If so, there may have once been a whole undiscovered network that extended beneath the area. Who had the idea to carve such a large metropolis into the ground? And what was going on above ground that justified the extraordinary construction effort? Kuyu is one of the world's most intriguing archaeological finds because of those unanswered questions. There is support for Kuyu. Numerous smaller subterranean complexes can be found around Cappadocia, some of which connected by kilometer-long tunnels. This suggests a larger network, a hidden culture functioning on a scale that remains unclear. You can't help but wonder who originally imagined this metropolis beneath the rock, and why did they choose to live so far away from the sun given the conditions of the earth above? We travel east to a very different kind of mystery, from the secret tunnels of Kuyu, one that was extracted from the earth in pieces of gold rather than sculpted into it, bronze and jade. Its artistry was the source of this subsequent revelation shock, whereas Kuyu's mystery was its enormous underground scale. Things that are so strange and foreign that they appear to be from a different era of human history. The Xingxing Du Yi story started in 1929 when a farmer in China's Sichuan region discovered a trove of jade fragments while excavating a ditch. The discovery was acknowledged at the time, but not thoroughly examined, and the location was mostly forgotten for many years.
Large-scale excavations didn't start until the 1980s, when two enormous sacrificial pits containing thousands of objects were discovered. Archaeologists were initially drawn to these artifacts due to their style as well as their quantity. They didn't resemble any known Chinese culture's artifacts at all. Out of the ground sprang tall human figures, jade blades, gold jewelry, bronze masks with oversized features, and odd animal formations. Every piece is more impressive than the one before it. The finding raised the possibility of the existence of Sanning Dui, a highly developed Bronze Age society that had hitherto been unknown. There is nothing like the objects of Sanning Dui in Chinese archaeology. The massive bronze masks, some of which have faces more than a meter wide, stand out amid them. Many have large, glaring eyes that protrude in tubes or slits, perhaps to keep watch on the outside world. Others include bold geometric shapes for their stylized mouths, huge ears, and clearly defined noses. The bronze figures, one of which is more than 2 meters tall and is said to have carried an ivory object that has since been lost to time, are equally remarkable. Jade objects found at the site contain carved animal motifs and ceremonial knives, while gold pieces include elaborate foil masks and ornamental panels. The bronze tree sculpture, which is about 4 meters high and features delicate leaves and curling branches, is one especially well-known item. Incredible in both scope and artistry. This place had highly developed metallurgy. After being cast in several pieces, the bronzes were expertly put together. This style is remarkably distinct from that of the central Chinese Shang dynasty at the same time. Sanning Duis are large, abstract, and nearly fantastical, whereas Shang bronzes frequently have small, symmetrical patterns and tiote masks. It is evident that the two cultures evolved in quite different ways, both artistically and symbolically. Sanning Dui was a part of the ancient Shu kingdom, which flourished in the Sichuan basin approximately 3,000 years ago. This region's unique cultural evolution may be explained by the fact that it was geographically isolated from the Yellow River civilizations by rivers and mountains. There are no written records of Sanning Dui, at least not that we have found, despite its sophistication. The site's design and the relics themselves give us a great deal of information. A complex society with highly trained artisans, religious or ceremonial leaders, and extensive trading relations is suggested by the evidence. Items discovered at Sandoui, such as ivory, seashells, and specific stones, indicate interactions with other regions. The city and its culture seem to have been abandoned at some point. The causes are yet unknown. Conflict, resource depletion, flooding, and environmental change are all possible outcomes. For whatever reason, Sanqingdui vanished from history, leaving only its remarkable relics to serve as evidence. The greatest mystery of Sanqingdui's art is its originality. No other pattern in Chinese history is as common as the huge projecting eyes found on numerous masks and statues. Were they representations of mythological creatures, gods, or ancestors? While some historians believe they're connected to local traditions of supernatural rulers, others believe they show a concentration on seeing as a spiritual concept. The absence of clear connections to other cultures of the era is what makes it odd. Though they did not share artistic style or iconography, the Shang dynasty, which peaked during the flourishing of Sanqingdui, did share some technologies. This has made some people question whether Sanqingdui evolved largely independently or if it retained elements of an even older, lost society. The question of why so many precious objects were buried in sacrificial pits is another. Were these sacrifices to the gods, signals of the city's demise? Or was the burial a part of a prearranged ceremony connected to the extinction of the culture? Sanqingdui remains as one of the most enigmatic Bronze Age finds in the world.
Historians are compelled by its relics to reconsider the diversity of early Chinese civilizations. The question they leave us with is possibly the most intriguing. Was Sanqingdui genuinely isolated, or was it merely one surviving fragment of an unsolved, much bigger puzzle? We travel west from the elaborate bronze masks of Sanqingdui to the deserts of Jordan and Syria, where another sort of mystery is spread out across the landscape, not in jade or gold, but in stone, and is presented on a scale that is only fully appreciated from above. When British Royal Air Force pilots were flying over the deserts of Jordan and Syria in the 1920s, they saw a number of enormous, precisely circular formations on the ground, which is how the giant circles first appeared in the archaeological record. They quickly stood out from above. In otherwise rough and uneven terrain is carved with geometric forms. However, they were much easier to ignore on the ground. Composed of modest, natural-looking stone walls, they might be mistaken for naturally occurring rock formations. Many of these circles were noted in early surveys, but for decades they were given only cursory consideration due to a lack of funding and other priorities. Interest didn't pick back up until the 21st century, when contemporary satellite imagery became extensively available. Researchers were able to identify dozens of circles with exceptional accuracy thanks to digital techniques, demonstrating how uniform the circles' sizes were across different locations. As of right now, we know of at least a dozen significant instances in Syria and Jordan. However, the circles are still mysterious even with high-resolution photographs. There are no inscriptions, clear cultural indicators, or associated buildings that can provide a clear explanation for their origins or purpose.
The large circles are around 400 meters or 1,300 feet in diameter, which is about the length of 4 football fields set end to end. Their sizes vary significantly. Their walls are only a meter high and are made of local stone that has been stacked together without mortar. Although the walls' thicknesses vary, they are typically too thin to be useful barriers for people or animals. Their accuracy may be the most remarkable aspect. Despite their enormous size, several of the circles are nearly perfectly round, with variations from a true circle measuring only a few millimeters. Even with today's surveying equipment, let alone whatever techniques their builders had at their disposal, this degree of accuracy would be difficult to achieve. Interestingly, none of the circles have obvious gates or openings. If they were ever there, they might have vanished or become hidden over time. It's also odd where they are. Most are found in open, level areas that don't seem to be connected to any known rivers, trade routes, or settlements. Due to the absence of organic material for carbon dating, dating the circles is difficult. Some archaeologists suggest they may be at least 2,000 years old, while others believe they may be considerably older, possibly even prehistoric. Ancient structures abound in the deserts of Jordan and Syria, ranging from Roman roads and fortifications to prehistoric cairns and stone alignments. These areas have been inhabited by trading groups, permanent farmers, and nomadic herders for thousands of years, all of whom have shaped the terrain. It's known that other extensive stone structures in the area, sometimes referred to as desert kites, were used for animal wilding or hunting. However, this pattern does not fit the large circles. They lack the funnel-like openings that are characteristic of kites, and are too low and open. Although nothing within the large circles suggests such a function, some archaeologists have observed that smaller stone circles and geoglyphs throughout the Middle East sometimes identify burial places or ceremonial grounds. It is difficult to firmly associate them with any one civilization or era due to the lack of artifacts, tools, ceramics, and bones.
The idea that the large circles served as border markers is among the most straightforward. Monumental markings that show the boundaries of a sacred area, tribal territory, or rights to seasonal grazing. Neighboring tribes could have received a visual signal from large, prominent shapes in the environment. They might also have served ceremonial or ritual purposes. Seasonal meetings, processions, or outdoor ceremonies could have taken place in an enclosed area 400 meters wide. The idea of transitory events where people gathered only during specific seasons of the year may be compatible with the absence of permanent structures inside. Some scholars have proposed that the large rings were intended to be large-scale symbolic or artistic representations rather than functional enclosures. Ancient geoglyphs that resemble the Peruvian Nazca lines. The whole extent of the circles would have been apparent from the nearby hills. Furthermore, the designs might have been intended for a non-human audience if their creators had thought of gods or spirits keeping watch from above. One of the most perplexing features is the lack of entrances. It can imply that humans or animals were never supposed to enter them in the first place, or that entry was restricted. The combination of the large circle's size, accuracy, and seeming lack of purpose is what makes them so mysterious. Even with basic stone walls, it takes a lot of work and careful planning to build a flawless circle hundreds of meters wide.
A society had to have a cause for making that effort. However, no distinct goal has surfaced. Their constancy is also fascinating. The circle's comparable sizes and construction techniques, whether in Jordan or Syria, suggest a common cultural ancestry or long-standing custom. However, it is impossible to determine whether they were constructed simultaneously or over several centuries in the absence of datable material or inscriptions. The circles are now simpler to locate and examine thanks to modern technology, yet the problem still remains. There are a lot of questions that come up the more we examine things. Were they enormous signs for travelers, platforms for long-lost ceremonies, or remnants of a common, antiquated custom whose significance has vanished into thin air? As of right now, their stones have been worn by ages of wind and sun, leaving them as mute silhouettes in the desert. Although we can measure and map them, the significance of the large circles will remain as unclear as the environments they occupy until new information becomes available. We now travel to a totally different location, beneath the placid surface of a freshwater lake in northern Israel. Leaving behind the expansive dry landscapes where the large circles spread across the ground, sonar scans have uncovered something enormous and surprising. At the bottom of the Sea of Galilee lies a massive stone monument that is completely silent. A team using sonar to investigate the Sea of Galilee, also known as Lake Kinneret, discovered an irregularity on the lakebed in 2003. A sizable conical bulk that rose from the sediment at a height of roughly 9 meters was visible in the reading. Its regular shape first suggested that it was man-made, yet it could have been mistaken for a natural rock structure. Divers who were sent to investigate discovered a meticulously constructed edifice composed entirely of big basalt stones. The formation was obviously deliberate, with the rocks organized in a way that wouldn't happen spontaneously. The discovery was noteworthy for its location as well as its size, fully immersed in an area devoid of similar structures. Questions were raised immediately by its appearance on the lakebed. Who constructed it? For what purpose was it used? Most interesting of all, was it always underwater? Built from native basalt boulders, the structure is a massive cairn, a pile of stones, many of which weigh hundreds of kilograms each. Approximately 32 feet, 10 meters high, and nearly 230 feet, 70 meters in circumference at the base, these stones were placed to form a cone. An estimated 60,000 tons of granite, or 230,000 cubic feet, make up the cairn, according to researchers. It weighs more than many contemporary Navy vessels, to put that into context. It looks as though the stones were positioned carefully and with weight to maintain the structure's stability rather than mortar. For the lake, the cairn sits in comparatively deep water. Divers have observed that its slopes are steep and constant, indicating intentional design, despite the fact that visibility is frequently low. Though nothing quite this huge has been documented underwater in the area, the arrangement is comparable to large stone burial mounds or ceremonial cairns found on land in numerous ancient cultures. Since the cairn has been buried for ages by dirt and water, dating it is challenging. Nonetheless, based on analogies to other stone constructions on land, scientists think it might have originated as early as the Bronze Age, some 4,000 years ago. The monument may have existed before the present shoreline of the lakes, if the dating is accurate. The cairn was first constructed on dry land or in a marshy location close to the sea. It might have been gradually drowned by rising floods over millennia. There are a number of theories regarding its purpose. It might have been a burial mound, constructed in memory of a notable local leader. On the other hand, it might have been used as a ceremonial location, a site of ritual, or a meeting place for locals. It might have also served as a harbor marker or landmark to guide boats around the edge of the lakes. All of these arguments are theoretical in the absence of artifacts or inscriptions. However, the amount of work required to create such a monument indicates that its creators placed a great deal of value on it. It would have taken a great deal of planning and labor to move and place 60,000 tons of basalt without the use of contemporary equipment. To create the steep-sided conical shape of the Chiron, the builders would have had to carefully quarry the stones, transport them to the construction site, and stack them. The stones could have been moved from surrounding sources using sledges, rollers, or basic rafts if it had been constructed on land. Because there was no mortar, the integrity of the construction was solely dependent on precise placement, which would have called for skill and experience. The size of the Chiron suggests a concerted community effort, perhaps spanning many years. It also implies that the builders had a motive for devoting so much effort to a building that did not directly supply food or shelter. To legitimize the work, it must have had substantial symbolic or practical value, regardless of its intended use. Whether the Chiron was constructed on land or in the water is the main mystery. The monument might have stood on a hill or beach if the water level had been lower in the past, but it would have eventually been flooded by the lake's natural depth variations. It would require a much greater degree of skill and perseverance for a Bronze Age culture if it was constructed underwater. Its cultural background is equally enigmatic. In the Sea of Galilee, no other such submerged monuments are known. Furthermore, it is now impossible to associate it with a particular group in the absence of artifacts or remains. The Chiron will continue to be one of the most fascinating underwater findings in the area until additional evidence is found, either by excavation or new technology. This will raise the question of whether the constructors of the lake saw it as it is now, or if the environment around it was completely different. We head far, far south to the undulating hills of southeast Zimbabwe. From the still submerged Chiron of the Sea of Galilee, the great Zimbabwe enclosure rises from the ground here like the walls of a long-forgotten fortress. The remains of Great Zimbabwe were first discovered by strangers as early as the 16th century, though the locals had long known about them and associated them with the heritage of the Shona people.
When European tourists arrived at the location later in the 19th century, they published elated descriptions of a huge stone city in southern Africa's interior. Colonial bias tainted early interpretations. Some said that Africans couldn't have constructed it. Serious research did not support such assertion. After conducting a thorough excavation in 1929, archaeologist Gertrude Caton Thompson came to the firm conclusion that the builders were African, a conclusion supported by all subsequent significant research. Great Zimbabwe is a region of wide valleys and granite hills in southeast Zimbabwe. The stone was close by. As they weather, massive kopjes or granite outcrops naturally release sheets of stone. That substance served as the foundation for one of Africa's greatest architectural triumphs. The Great Enclosure, the biggest single ancient construction south of the Sahara, is located within this larger metropolis, which is dispersed across hills and valley levels. The Great Enclosure is an oval of dry stone masonry that encloses an area that is about 250 meters or 820 feet in circumference. Its outside wall can be more than 5 meters thick at its base and more than 11 meters or about 36 feet at its greatest point. The blocks are not joined by mortar. Precision is the key to stability. The wall leans gradually towards its center of gravity due to the well-manicured granite courses that are laid with a small inward batter. A second parallel wall curves around to form a narrow curved passageway inside the large enclosure. As you pass through it, your view of the future is restricted by blind turns, a deliberate design that seems to direct processions or regulate who is allowed to enter interior areas. Not only is the masonry useful, an ornate coursing on some sections of the wall, which includes chevron and herringbone patterns, is evident of how the builders were attuned to structure and design. The conical tower, a solid, tapering stone structure that is around 5 meters broad at its base and 9 meters tall, is the building's most recognizable feature. It lacks an internal chamber and a doorway. Its appearance is powerful, but its meaning is up for debate. Platforms, terraces, and the stone footings of circular houses that were once located here, likely constructed in Dhaka, as well as earthen plaster over pole frameworks, can be found surrounding the tower and along the interior of the enclosures. When taken as a whole, they address a crowded, structured area that might be political, ceremonial, residential, or a mix of all three. The technical mastery is highlighted when viewing the wall up close. The builders cut the faces to fit snugly in courses by quarrying slabs from neighboring kopjes, splitting them, probably with the use of heat and quenching or iron tools. Much of the wall still stands strong despite centuries of weathering and plant growth, which is a clear indication of meticulous engineering and extensive experience. Between the 11th and 15th centuries, Great Zimbabwe flourished as the capital of a kingdom that dominated inland trade routes that connected the Indian Ocean coast to cattle-rich plateaus and gold fields. Goods traveled over the Swahili coast and beyond, from ports like Sefala, where they encountered traders from China, India, and Arabia. Imports found during excavations in and around the Great Enclosure and the larger site made those ties evident. Arab coins, glass beads from the Indian Ocean trade, Persian glazed goods, and Chinese Celadon porcelain. They are accompanied by regional goods, iron implements, jewelry made of copper and gold, and the well-known carved soapstone birds. A stylized rendition of those soapstone figurines, which are most likely symbolic or dynastic insignia, can be seen on Zimbabwe's current national flag. They are so essential to the site's identity that the Shona term Zimbazamabwe, which means houses of stone, is perhaps where the nation's name originates.
At its height, thousands of people lived among the valley enclosures and hilltop complexes, although estimates of the city's population vary. Stone architecture delineated areas of elite status.
The majority resided in homes in Dhaka. Nearby, metallurgy was practiced. Crucibles and slag were left over from the smelting of iron and the working of gold. Whereas the nearby plains were grazed by cattle, a crucial indicator of wealth and rank. The influence of Great Zimbabwe began to decline by the middle of the 15th century. Proposed causes include resource pressure in the local environment, political realignments toward the northern state of Mutapa, changes in trade routes toward competing towns, and excessive grazing surrounding the capital. As the populace grew, the stone walls persisted. What was the purpose of the big enclosure? Three key concepts predominate. A royal home first. A place designated for the monarch and court is indicated by the tall walls, regulated passageways, and symbolic conical tower. Second, a place of worship or ritual. The inner passage's processional vibe. The tower and ornamental courses imply this location may have been the site of public rites or initiation privileges. Third, a united royal ritual precinct where religious performance and political authority supported one another. Much of the discussion is fueled by the conical tower. In an economy based on livestock and grain, some saw it as a stylized granary, a symbol of plenty and the king's function as the provider. Some see it as a monument that serves just as a visual focal point for rituals. Without inscriptions, the enclosure permits multiple readings, and the argument is based on comparison and context. How could builders accomplish this accuracy without mortar or written plans, I wonder? Craft traditions are probably the answer. Stonemason teams using real-world templates, honing skills through practice and observation, and transferring methods from one generation to the next. It appears from the ornamental coursing that builders were doing more than simply piling stones. They were using it to compose. For a long time, the site's history was clouded by outsiders, mythology, lost tribes, and Phoenicians. The archaeology refutes their assertions. African builders created Great Zimbabwe, which was most likely exhibited to ancestors who used local resources, regional trade, and skilled labor to create something distinctive for its time and location. Nevertheless, one last alluring query remains. Was Great Zimbabwe the pinnacle of a long-standing tradition, or was it the last surviving example of a larger architectural civilization whose other outstanding creations have been lost to history? Although the walls don't say so, they strongly suggest that there is yet more to discover. We travel back in time to one of the first Mesopotamian civilizations, starting from the imposing walls of Great Zimbabwe. Archaeologists discovered a collection of relics in these ancient southern Iraqi towns that have baffled scholars for a century. Little clay figurines featuring lizard features and human bodies. In 1919, while conducting excavations in southern Mesopotamia, now called Iraq, the Ube lizard sculptures were discovered for the first time. These excavations were carried out as part of British-led archaeological expeditions that looked for the early stages of Mesopotamian civilization at locations like Tel Alubaid, Ur, and Eridu. Currently dated between 5000 and 4000 BC, the Ubaid period is regarded as one of the region's fundamental cultures and precedes the emergence of the Sumerian city-states. The figures were discovered during excavations between layers of household detritus, ceremonial buildings, and mud brick building remnants. They were often found with minor ceremonial items, farming implements, and exquisitely decorated pottery with geometric patterns. As excavations progressed throughout southern Mesopotamia over the ensuing decades, more specimens were found, eventually amounting to dozens. Researchers were initially drawn to the sculpture's remarkably non-human heads. These possessed reptilian faces with long muzzles, large almond-shaped eyes, and smooth, almost scaled surfaces. In contrast to figurines from other ancient societies that often portrayed women, gods, or generic human forms,
Cattle, sheep, and goats, and engaged in irrigated agriculture, growing barley and wheat. Settlements often included large tripartite temples, rectangular buildings divided into 3 parallel halls, suggesting organized religion. They also created unique painted ceramics with buff backgrounds and geometric designs in black or dark brown. Imported commodities and common cultural characteristics demonstrated the extent of trade connections throughout the Arabian Peninsula. Social stratification, greater elite homes, specialized craft manufacturing, and centralized temple administration all emerged during the Ubaid period. Archaeologists must completely reconstruct the Ubaid people's beliefs and social structures from artifacts like the lizard figurines, because, in spite of their complexity, they left no written records. The clay figurines, which range in height from a few inches to slightly more than 20 centimeters, are either sun-dried or baked in a kiln. The heads are not clearly human in proportion, but the bodies are. The elongated faces have broad, unblinking eyes and tapering snouts. Some heads are spherical and smooth. Some have crests or ridges that extend from the brow to the crown. The attire worn by several of the figures is denoted by large lines and patterns. Some are naked, while others have intricate neckwear, skirts, and belts. The figure holding a baby is one of the most stunning subsets. In many instances, the child and adult have similar reptile characteristics, suggesting a symbolic or narrative meaning that humans are no longer able to decipher. Whether legendary characters, ancestral spirits, or participants in ritual rites, their shared characteristics indicate a coherent notion. The craftsmanship varies from simple and stylized to exquisitely detailed, indicating that they were created by different artists or for different purposes. Another difficulty is raised by the fact that many were discovered in or close to household areas. Were these toys, personal devotional objects, or household talismans endowed with symbolic meaning?
We can only make educated guesses in the absence of written explanations, but the recurrent themes and meticulous attention to detail imply they had purposes beyond ornamentation. The Ubaite lizard sculpture's actual function remains unknown. The majority of theories tend to be religious or symbolic, possibly depicting gods associated with nature, fertility, or protection. In later Mesopotamian tales, reptiles, especially snakes, were occasionally connected to the underworld, creation, and rebirth. Thus, the reptile characteristics may have similar connotations in this context. According to some academics, the lizard-like appearance of the figurines may be associated with shamanic practices, signifying a metamorphosis or a connection to animal spirits. Others believe they might symbolize ceremonial masks that were preserved in clay for ceremonial or memorial purposes. The figurines have generated more speculative theories outside of scholarly circles. While fringe tales envision them as images of a now extinct reptilian race, ancient astronaut theorists use their non-human appearance as evidence of extraterrestrial contact. Because the images are so strikingly different from usual prehistoric human depictions, these interpretations, which lack supporting evidence, continue to be used in popular media. This is what we do know. They are specific to the Ubaite cultural domain, intentional and consistent. The Ubaite lizard figurines are among the most mysterious artifacts from the ancient Near East, regardless of whether they were stylized artwork, mythological symbols, or the expression of a belief system that we are no longer able to recreate.
Conceive moving them without the aid of contemporary machinery. These are the dolmens, megalithic monuments that are one kind of archaeology's most persistent mysteries due to their enormous size and worldwide dispersion. One kind of megalithic building is a dolmen, which is often composed of two or more upright stones that hold up a huge horizontal slab called a capstone. In some places, the outcome is referred to as stone tables, since it somewhat resembles a stone table. To create a burial mound, many dolmens were first covered with dirt or smaller stones. Over time, this covering frequently eroded away, leaving only the stone skeleton. Dolmens are particularly fascinating because of their vast distribution. They can be found in portions of Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Some dolmens are over 5,000 years old and are widespread in Western Europe, including Brittany, France, Wales, and Ireland. Examples in the Middle East include Israel, Syria, and Jordan. They can be found farther east in the southern regions of India and Korea, where thousands of them can be seen scattered around the landscape. The Polnabran dolmen in Ireland, which has worn limestone uprights and a capstone weighing more than 70 tons, is among the most well-known examples. The enormous capstone of the Brownshill dolmen in Ireland is thought to weigh over 100 tons, and Korea's Gangwon dolmens, which vary in size from little table-like constructions to massive monuments with capstones longer than 7 meters. The production of these stones is astounding due to their immense size. Sometimes the weight of capstones is greater than that of the largest blocks used in the pyramids of Egypt. It would have taken a great deal of personnel to move and position them, as well as a profound understanding of structure, balance, and leverage. The fact that most dolmens are from the Neolithic or early Bronze Age, long before the wheel was invented in many of the tribes that constructed them, makes them particularly remarkable. Dolmens are usually made up of upright stones, also known as orthostacks, that are firmly buried in the ground to create a chamber. The capstone, which can weigh a few tons to well over 100, is placed on top of these uprights. Given that the only tools that could have been used were made of stone, wood, or bone, the level of precision required to position such a stone so that it sits securely on its supports is astounding. To get the stones from their source to the location, archaeologists believe builders most likely used a mix of ramps, wooden rollers, levers, and unprocessed labor. Stones may have come from nearby quarries in some instances. They seem to have been carried from kilometers distant in others. Building an earth ramp up to the top of the uprights, sliding the stone into position, and then removing the earth once the structure was stable could have been the process for placing the capstone. The idea that dolmens were used for ceremonial or funerary purposes is the most commonly accepted. Human remains, ceramics, tools, and decorations have been found in and around numerous dolmens, indicating that they served as the final resting places for important individuals or family units. They may also have been used as communal graveyards, reopened several times to accommodate additional remains. Although some dolmens are part of larger megalithic complexes, others create small chambers that might have been sealed with more stones. They may have had astronomical or ceremonial significance in some areas, based on their alignment with celestial events such as the solstices.
Their deliberate placement, often atop hills or in conspicuous places throughout the landscape, confirms that they were intended to be viewed from afar and serve as enduring memorials to the departed. How so many vastly disparate cultures across continents and oceans managed to create structures with such a similar design is still a mystery. Direct contact between Bronze Age Korea and Neolithic Ireland is not supported by any evidence. However, both created dolmens with quite similar shapes and purposes. Was this merely an instance of convergent development, in which several communities separately came up with the same way to pay respect to the deceased? Or might it allude to more ancient customs that have been passed down through migration routes from the prehistoric era? The puzzle is further complicated by the sheer engineering difficulty. In many instances, these were societies without draft animals, metal equipment, or wheeled transportation. However, they were able to mine, move, and position stones that weigh dozens of tons with accuracy. Strong leadership and a social framework that can rally big crowds behind a single lofty objective are necessary for the planning and labor organization that are needed. Furthermore, although many dolmens were used as tombs, it is more difficult to determine their cultural and symbolic significance. Were they symbols of vanished mythology, ceremonial entrances, or boundaries of territory? Until additional information is discovered, dolmens will continue to serve as a reminder that even in prehistory, people were able to create monuments that would stand the test of time and a testament to human ingenuity. Which of these most piqued your interest? Do you think we overlooked a site that should be on our list? Or do you have your own theory? Leave a comment below with your opinions. Hearing them would be wonderful. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you liked this tour of some of the most enigmatic ancient locations on Earth. There will be many more in the future. History leaves behind weird, lingering questions, lost cities, and forgotten cultures. As always, be curious. Until the next time.